Nigeria, by extension Africa, battles a growing youthful population and with little or no meaningful engagement leaves a ticking time bomb on our hands. We are a blessed continent with great wealth, both in people and material. Our focus on ways remains driving conversations that affects us all. Topics in the news, social concerns, politics, leadership, governance, empowerment, resource management, conflict management, finance, SME sustainability, technological innovation, food security, health, education, brain drain, our well-being, citizenship, and much more. Our goal is to continuously drive these conversations, keep them burning at the table to effect a positive change, both for our nation and continent. Ways, what are you saying, has a secret ingredient that completes the conversation every single episode, and that ingredient is you. Our past conversations shaped our yesterday. To shape our tomorrow, we must keep talking. So, I want to hear you. Be a part of our live conversations Mondays through Fridays. And let's all have our say.
Good evening and welcome to Waves Primetime. My name is Chioma Carlo, and tonight I'm going to be talking about something that's been making waves, in this nation recently, something that touches all of us. I think for some reasons, I held back a bit discussing it on this table, but I think we're going to just do it tonight. So Nigeria, once again, finds itself at the center of international attention, right? But this time, over grave allegations of genocide and religious persecutions. Now, the U.S. President Donald Trump recently claimed that Christians in Nigeria are facing genocide, and even suggested that America might consider intervention if the killings persist. And if you remember his press statement, he said Nigeria has become a nation of particular concern. Now, the Nigerian federal government, on their part, has reacted strongly, urging Trump and the international community to approach Nigeria's situation with understanding. Now, Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, said Nigeria's challenges are complex, driven by terrorism, banditry, and communal clashes, not religious persecution. Now, similarly, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tuga, maintained that the state-backed persecution is impossible under Nigeria's constitution. But you see, this controversy is not without contest. Across social media, right, we have seen disturbing videos and eyewitness accounts, circulating, particularly from the northern communities. Now, we've seen scenes of destructions, killings, displacements, mass burials. Local groups and clerics even have continued to raise these outcries, insisting that what's happening amounts to a silent genocide, especially in parts of Plateau, Benue, Kaduna, and Taraba states. Now, the question is, are these allegations exaggerated, right? Are they just political narratives, or do they really reflect a painful reality the world can no longer ignore? There's a lot of things to unpack in this particular conversation, because you're tempted to say that the Nigerian government they're a bit detached, from the realities of the common man, because I do not understand how you can, with all the videos and press statements and special exclusive reports done that you're seeing everywhere, you still look us in the eye and you say, oh, there is no such thing as religious persecution. Well, I'm not going to sit here and act oblivious like most of you are doing, but this is really something that needs to be looked into. Now, remember, Ways is all about you as you are the why in Ways. And so, like the manner is, you can be a part of the conversation every single day, especially tonight. I need to hear your insights. I need you to add your voice to this discussion. Head on now to our YouTube channel at Official Upgrade TV. Hit the subscribe button. Like, share, invite your friends and family to join the show. And when I open my phone lines, I'd really love to hear what you have to say. As always, here is a quote for you to, ponder on. This was said by Mohammed Idris, Minister of Information and National Orientation. He said, we welcome cooperation and dialogue, but it must come with understanding. I mean, he was saying this to the American President Donald Trump. We're going to go into all of these things. Like I said earlier, this is the basis of our conversation tonight. But before we do that, we're going to go on a short break. When we come back, I'll take you through my news interest for the day. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Ways, and these are the news that caught my attention today. The first one is, well, I mean, we're starting on a sad note. It says 2 arrested for criticizing Kano local government chairman. My goodness. Now, the story says there is growing concern in Tofa local government area of Kano State following the arrest of 2 members of the New Nigeria People's Party, NNPP, after a Facebook post allegedly accusing the council chairman, Ibrahim Yakubu Addis, of abandoning a road construction project. Now, the 2 identified as Murtala Garba Doka and Shamsu Safiyanu Lambu, popularly known as Shamsit Lambu, were reportedly picked up on Monday on the orders of the chairman. Now, their arrest was allegedly prompted by a Facebook post made by Shamsit Lambu, in which he accused the chairman of failing to complete the Lambu Banki Yarimawa Jakarta Road project, said to have been approved by the state government at a cost of about 240 million naira. Now, in the post, Lambu stated, our 240 million in Burji. May God reward us. Now, sources said the 2 party members were initially detained at the Tofa Divisional Police Station before being transferred to the Kano State Police Command headquarters in Bompai for further investigation. Confirming the developments, Comrade Nazifi Ado Lambu, a youth leader in the area, said the arrest had generated tension among residents. A resident of Lambu Ward, who pleaded anonymity, said the community had long appealed to the council chairman to fix the road, adding that he initially promised to do so. And when contacted, the chairman, Ibrahim Yakubu Addis, told the correspondent that he instituted their arrest at the CID on the issue to clarify the claims. And here I am wondering, what claims are you clarifying? What claims exactly? Because this is the problem Nigeria has, right? We are so detached. We have a problem of misplaced priority, right? Now, somebody calls you out and your first reaction is to arrest the person. This was the same thing we saw in Kebbi State the last time. And now, that's not even all, right? You can quickly pick up somebody that made an innocent Facebook page pointing you to the direction of what you should be doing as local government chairman. And you can easily pick them up, but you can't pick up, the terrorists. It's very amazing. The other day, the Kaduna State governor told us, oh, we know where these bandits live. Oh, we know who they are. And then when he was asked the $1 million question, why are we not arresting them yet? He couldn't answer that. So why are we quick to pick up ordinary Nigerians who just want a better place to be, who just want a better nation? Like I said, some people can't afford to japa. Some people can't afford that cost of, migrating from here to some other place for greener pastures or for better life, whatever. But the ones that can't afford it, we can at least have peace, calm, safety in this Nigeria. But no, when you're being called out for what you're supposed to do, you rush and you pick them up. I don't know what to say, right? We have a problem with, our priorities. We don't know when to stop as a nation, and that bothers me. It bothers me. Now, look at President Trump is all over the social media. You're seeing everybody's talking about Trump coming, right? And you're already fidgeting, but then you're not coming out plainly. You're not coming to tell us, oh, this is actually happening. You're still hell-bent on the fact that there are not... Anyway, I think this is a mess. You have no right to to arrest these two people. And we saw what the guy posted. There was no defamatory statement, nothing derogatory. He just pointed out this is our 240 million naira project. This is the state of it. It's just like if I decide to go and check the 30 kilometers out of the 700 and something kilometers coastal highway that Omahi says we're doing. And I go and maybe I see it in a deplorable state and I take a picture and I say, oh, this is where our how many billion is entering. And then I'm picked up. It doesn't make any sense. Let's do better. Anyway, moving on to my second story. It says, stop celebrating worthless GDP figures. Osibanjo warns African governments. Now, the former Vice President, Yemi Osibanjo, has cautioned African governments against celebrating GDP growth figures that do not translate into improved living conditions for citizens. At the 65th anniversary of the Ford Foundation in West Africa, in Abuja, Osibanjo stated that the continent had recorded, some of the world's highest GDP growth rates in recent years, yet remained burdened by poor welfare indicators, weak healthcare systems, education gaps, and widespread unemployment. Now, the former vice president said the experience in office revealed a deep disconnect between the macroeconomic numbers and the daily realities of ordinary Nigerians. He said Africa is the fastest growing continent in GDP terms and has been so far, been that for so long. Yet it remains the continent with the lowest overall quality of life based on global indices like health, education, infrastructure, and economic stability. Now, in other words, GDP growth does not mean development for majority. It does not necessarily translate to jobs or a decent life for citizens. One of my biggest frustration, he says, as vice president and chair of the economic team in our government from 2016 to 2019 was how people reacted when we discussed GDP growth figures. He said the vast majority asked, do these people live in a different country? I can't pay my children's school fees or hospital bills. Where is this growth? It became clear to me that when we as the government talk about growth, citizens wonder what we're talking about. Only big businesses like banks actually understand these things. I am very impressed and very happy that it is somebody who has been in government that is saying these things, because I have been shouting it on this table. In fact, the last time I had a conversation on the GDP of Nigeria, it came to 4 point something and was celebrating, we're looking good on paper. But then, like I said, it never reflects, on the realities of the common Nigerian, right? You're sitting there telling us the prices of goods have crashed, but we are still going to the market and buying at the same cost. In fact, we're buying at a more expensive price rate. It now begs the question, where is the growth you're talking about? You go on global stages and you're telling us the numerous things that we're saying. The other day, was it not, Showore was arrested because, he was threatened to be arrested by the DSS because he called our president a criminal. Now, I am not backing him, calling him a criminal, but what inspired that was our president going on a global stage. I think that was Brazil he went to, and he said corruption does not exist in Nigeria. And you're here wondering, am I in another nation? Is this not Nigeria? When did we eradicate that? So these are the things that it sounds very foreign. You go over there and you say all of the things you're saying. You're telling us, you have insecurity, you have nipped it to the bud, you have it under control, and yet we're having this quality of living that we have now that is very scary. We're having things like banditry, terrorism is on the high. Now we're talking about genocide, but yet you still go and tell us, we're doing this, we're doing that. It doesn't make any sense. So when I saw this story this morning, I said, yes, it's really good that someone who's been in power can relate to these things. He has come out, he has seen it, and then he can tell us the truth, because sometimes these people want to act like they live under a rock and they don't live here. They don't know what life is like. Well, actually they don't. But then the true test of your governance is how those are the grassroots are being treated, what they say about you. People don't remember what you say. It's the impact you've had on their lives that they remember. So I really do commend Osibanjo for this comment, because if those in government would be wise to take a leaf out of this thing he said, this is a call to action. Do something. Make sure we are in sync. Whatever you're putting on paper, let it reflect in reality. All right, moving on to my last story of interest, which also I can link to our topic of discussion for tonight. It says, U.S. military presents plan for potential action in Nigeria. The story says the U.S. military, has submitted contingency plans for potential strikes on Nigeria following a directive from President Donald Trump to prepare for possible action over a false claim of Christian genocide. Now, the New York Times report that the U.S. Africa Command has drawn up and sent its option to the Department of War this week upon the request of Secretary Pete Hegseth. Now, according to the report, excuse me, published on Wednesday, the contingency plan from the African Command included, excuse me, let's take a short break and we'll come back to this last story. Thank you very much. All right, apologies for that short break. So the U.S. military has submitted contingency plans for potential strikes on Nigeria following a directive by President Donald Trump to prepare for possible action over a false claim of Christian genocide. Now, the New York Times reports that the U.S. Africa Command has drawn up and sent its options to the Department of War this week upon the request of Secretary Pete Hegseth. Now, according to the report published on Wednesday, the contingency plan from the African Command includes 3 options. There is heavy, medium, and light. Now, each was designed to allow for a controlled escalation. The New York Times reported that the military officials disclosed that the heavy option presented by the command is the most forceful and could take, is the most forceful response the U.S. could take against Nigeria. Now, it involves sending an aircraft carrier group to the Gulf of Guinea, off the Nigerian coast, and using fighter jets or long-range bombers to strike targets deep inside northern Nigeria. Now, for the medium option, the command suggested using drone strikes against militant camps, bases, the convoys, and the vehicles in northern Nigeria. And the military officials told the New York Times that the light option would center on partner-enabled operations with the U.S. military and State Department supporting Nigerian government forces to target Boko Haram and Islamist insurgents responsible for attacks, kidnappings, and killings of civilians. This is very scary, you guys. I don't know. I don't know if it doesn't scare you, but war is not a joke. It's not a joke. These people are gearing up. Oh, my Lord. Please, I don't know, federal government, I don't know what to say to you guys, but let this thing not get to where it's going, because it's not a good sight. Anyway, let's dive straight into our conversation for tonight, right? We're talking about genocide claims, and we're asking, is Nigeria being misunderstood by the U.S. or, being misrepresented? Before we go into it, remember you can join the conversation by sending an SMS or WhatsApp to 0818-038-4663. You can also call on 070-2500-7749 and also on 0701-4242-420. Let's hear what you have to say. Now, beyond the statements, beyond the press releases, the issue has struck a deep emotional chord, not just internationally, but here at home, right? For weeks, Nigerians have watched disturbing videos from communities in the north. Villages burnt, families displaced, lives lost, and many are still asking the same painful question. How much longer? How much longer are we going to stay on this? The government insists that these attacks are not religiously motivated, that they are symptoms of broader insecurity crisis. But for many victims, the line between terrorism and persecution has become very blurred. We don't even know what is what. Because, when your loved one is killed, the reason may, matter less than the fact that justice never follows in Nigeria. So it's also about how we as a nation tell our own story. Now, when powerful voices abroad describe what's happening in Nigeria as genocide, it shapes global perception, right? And it puts the government on the defensive. I mean, they've been on the defensive side since this narrative started flying. Yet it also confronts us, it challenges us to confront the truth. Have we downplayed our own tragedy for too long? I think we have. I really do think we have. Anyway, tonight, to help us peel this peel back all the politics and looking at the heart of the matter. I mean, I'm talking the people, the pain, the perception. To help us unpack all of these developments, I'm being joined now by a public policy analyst, Salahuddin Hashim, and is going to be helping us do that. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me.
Great. So let's start with context, right? When President Trump accused Nigeria of genocide against Christians, what evidence? I don't know. What reports? How do you feel about that personally?
Well, I think it would be nice to begin by saying that as a practitioner and somebody who has actively engaged counterterrorism in the front, and that is because counterterrorism is my specialty.
Okay.
And of course, I think it is very important to state it categorical that we have a problem and we have a situation, and that is a fact. We cannot take away that. But again, the president of the United States narrative is something that is very divisive and is actually very dangerous. Dangerous because already we have a situation in the country where people are polarized along ethnic and religious lines. And then, of course, that in itself is at the bedrock of our own current reality. And again, it is because Nigeria over the years has also suffered very strongly from the entire political class that is using that as a weapon against citizens. So it is very important to also take that into perspective, because the biggest beneficiary of the president's comments are actually the terrorists who have taken life over the past few years. Every life matters, we know that. But again, when we begin to push this kind of narrative in the forefront, it creates a number of situations. Now, in terms of context, is the fact that what do we want to talk about? Is it religion or retribution? Religion in the sense that the country, as we know, is a secular state. Unfortunately, however, Nigerians are such a group of people who believe that having a spiritual being that also sovereigns over the beliefs and the activities of every mankind. And that in itself suggests very clearly that individually, religion is intrinsic to the people. But again, the state has failed. The state has failed in its inability to act in some areas where some actions were required. The Deborah issue in Sokoto, where she was murdered in the open light, and then of course, even political gladiators who made tweets eventually went and deleted those tweets because it sits with their narrative. Yes, we have seen some of those similar instances in Kubwa, in Abuja, where a woman who also went on evangelism also suffered the same fate. We have seen similar instances in Kano. We have seen cases where people have made statements that have been termed as blasphemy because they were restrictive comments. So those laws and then, of course, how he sits with people obviously exists, and we cannot take away those facts. But again, the president of the United States intervention, is it an issue of retribution? Currently, Nigeria joined what we call the non-sovereign nations. Non-sovereign nations are countries who have actually formed foreign policy independence, where they do not align or create allies, particularly with the far right. And this is actually creating quite a number of discomforts. And that was why at the just concluded UN General Assembly meeting, the Vice President took a stand and joined some European countries as well as some other countries to also make a campaign about free Palestine. That didn't sit well with those in the diplomatic corridor because, again, that suggests that Nigeria just went against an ally of the United States, which is Israel, and Israel is currently occupying and creating some kind of effort in that particular region. So that, again, is something that we need to interrogate. Number two is that our foreign policy also does not have any strategic influence in the sense that over the past 2 years, Nigeria has not had strategic career ambassadors across the countries and of the world. The US inclusive, China, India, even in Israel. These are countries that help influence strategic thinking. But Nigeria does not have career ambassadors there. And that tells very clearly that we have been very largely missing from diplomatic corridors where new narrative could have been shaped and put new narratives there and even help Nigeria to be able to help other global communities to think differently. So we were actually, as a country, the biggest challenge of ourselves in that regard. Number three is that insecurity does not pick its victim. Insecurity anywhere is actually something that every Nigerian should actually be very wary of. And that tells us that we need to be united against a common enemy. That in itself is what has actually been surgically divided with the statement and has whipped a number of sentiments in different quarters. But again, Nigeria and Nigerians must realize that our help cannot come from abroad. Even if the US comes in now and tries to intervene, it is going to be for a while. But again, is to say it is not something we want to see because we have seen in Libya, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, we have seen in different countries where the US has made it that those countries were never the same anymore. And that is again to say that there is no country, there is no savior or salvation that comes from abroad. Salvation oftentimes is something that comes from within. And that is why even in the scripture, it is said that you confess with your mouth. The confession comes from a belief internally, and then of course you express it out, and then of course that confirms your internal belief. We must internally first believe that we have a situation which the Nigerian government needs to acknowledge. That acknowledgement will lead to strategic operations. And unfortunately, over the past decade, Nigerian government and its armed forces have largely been either lazy and of course massively been corrupt with the approach they have actually deployed in the management of resources in counterterrorism efforts. And I think that is a conversation that we can have another time. But most importantly is that there is a whole lot of deficit in terms of how we manage this whole thing. Currently, we have what we call the National Security Strategy. The National Security Strategy is a bedrock to help us manage, prevent, and deter every form of threat. As a matter of fact, that document, for the very first time, inspire what we call the non-kinetic component. And the non-kinetic component is an approach that allows for both the state and non-state actors to synergize in terms of confronting a common threat. But again, the state is not willing to go in that direction, even though it is a document that the state had deliberately put together, because the kinetic component offers an opportunity for economy and commercialization, and that in itself suggests that the whole process of insecurity is actually something that somebody else somewhere is smiling to the bank for the sake of. And that is an issue that we need to worry. And you recall that if you talk about the economy or the paradox of plenty, the more money you put in a particular space, the larger the scale of insecurity in the country. And that naturally just describes what we are currently seeing in this country. There's
All
more
right,
money
sir, let me
globally.
interject you for a moment, sir. I'm sorry for interjecting, but I just need to ask this. When international figures like Trump, right, come out and say, oh, this is genocide happening in Nigeria, what are the legal and, moral implications for Nigeria, especially under the international law? What are we looking at? What are we working with?
There's no country sovereignty that is absolute, and I think that is very key. And that is because we are signatory to various international protocols. And then, of course, in this context, Nigeria is a signatory to the International Protocol on Religious Freedom. And that particular protocol had also forced us or extracted our commitments to comply. And that tells us that if we fail to do so, there are also sanctions that were outlined in that protocol. And one of which is to also create some level of restriction when it comes to aid, or to create some level of restriction when it comes to partnership in different space. But to be very honest, we need to take the comments from the president seriously. Even if it is not going to act, there are also direct and indirect consequences to that particular statement.
Right.
The indirect consequence is that foreign direct investors are going to pause for a little while, and they are going to check to be sure that something is not going to happen. And this has economic implication. It tells that your economy is actually going to stagger for a little longer because investors will not come. So those who are already here also will create a little bit of freeze to check if they are safe and their investment are safe. And that would also mean that people will scamper for direction in a while. So it has a little bit of a direct impact on how we deal with situation. And how does this speak to us politically? As we go into the 2027 general election, already our two previous elections has polarized us along religious and ethnic line. It is going to definitely play out again, and that unfortunately is going to really create another layer of tension and rivalry amongst the Nigerians. Lagos, for instance, has been a very liberal society for a very long time. Until the last election came, narratives were sold, people began to take positions and began to sell unfortunate misinformation, and that also has now created an ethnic situation in that state. Southwest for a long time hadn't suffered from this kind of situation, but lately it has become a rhetoric in the mouth of political elite, and this is where citizens need to also be very careful around. That most of the rhetoric that are sold by the political class are simply to weaponize all of it to continue to keep them in that particular base and distract the entire conversation while they form alliance against the citizen. There is no ethnicity, there is no religious genocide anywhere. What the genocide we have in Nigeria is actually the genocide of the state against its citizen.
All right,
And that
I'm
is
going
what
to.
for a very long time.
Yeah. I mean, I have a follow-up question to what you just said, but we'll go on a very short break. And when we come back, I'll take it from there.
Tell us you're a Nigerian without saying a word. Energy security is one of the most pressing issues for many developing countries like Nigeria. And if there's going to be any meaningful progress, addressing our energy issues is non-negotiable.
I need to see light for my house. Make them do something.
Band A is expensive. I literally have to turn off all my appliances just to reduce costs.
We need light.
Introducing the Energy Outlook, your go-to show for everything energy. Every week, we'll bring you the latest insights, innovation, and in-depth analysis of Nigeria's energy sector. From policy discussions to regulatory insights, we will analyze the key decisions influencing growth and sustainability in the energy sector. We'll bring you the human stories behind the headlines, giving you a personal perspective on the broader energy challenges. Join me every Friday at 6 p.m. for the Energy Outlook, your guide to the future of energy, where energy means business.
All right, you're welcome back. You're still watching Ways, and our conversation tonight is centered on the alleged religious genocide happening in Nigeria and the response of the U.S. President Donald Trump. And I am speaking to a public policy analyst, Mr. Hashim. So are you still with us? Okay, great. Now, just in your previous answers, you said there are no religious genocide anywhere. What we have is genocide between citizens and the nation. While I understand that, right, we can't turn a blind eye to videos that we are seeing circulating. We can't turn a blind eye to clergies and, humanitarian groups in the north warning the government and calling, for help. We've seen videos. They are not AI. They don't look like AI. We've seen actual videos. So are you saying that these things are really not happening? Because I beg to differ, sir. I think these things are happening.
I have not said that there are no killings, and I have not said that those things are not happening, and that those are not realities. And like I said, beyond the fact that I'm a counterterrorism consultant, I also live in the north, and of course, I know where some of these things happen. And there is something about geographical threats.
Okay.
If you live within a geographical space and there are insecurity in that place, of course, the first victim in that particular space would be those who are within that particular area. And that is a fact. You cannot take away that situation. So geography in itself, unfortunately, has situated people in a particular environment. Why do you have economic prosperity in states like Lagos, for instance, and in Port Harcourt, and that people there are actually affected? It is because they are geographically located where these flourishing activities are happening. So the people, first of all, have the direct benefit of those things happening within their terrain. Somebody in Lagos can easily dash you 50,000 naira or 10,000 or 5,000 without looking back. Somebody in Maiduguri cannot give you 1,000 naira because it's a civil service state and it is challenged with insecurity. So you realize that geography has a way of creating either positive or negative effects on the lives of the people. And that is one thing that we need to be very clear in terms of how we put it out there. Secondly, is the fact that, yes, because the North Central actually sits within the foyer of a number of myths. One is that people believe that the North Central has a particular kind of lush or grass that allows the cattle of the nomads to give birth twice in a year. So people tend to occupy those areas because of resources. It's a resource competition. If you go to the Benue Valley, there are about 5,000 herdsmen there. They were born there. They had no place to go. That place seemingly have been classified as their home, not because they are there, but because that is how life has actually put them, and they continue to live there. What I'm saying about how the state has actually failed the citizen is because these things had early warning for a very long time. Early warning because there had been a lot of ungoverned spaces, and those places have been abandoned. Aliens have actually crept in and they have occupied those places and they have lived there for so long, and they are now laying claim to some resources in that particular area. And that tells you that those who have the responsibility for alien control have not done their job. Those who have the responsibility for internal security have not been responsible enough to do their job. Those who have the responsibility to man the borders, to check for the importation of arms, have not done their job effectively. The borders up north are the most porous in the world because there is no any form of barrier. People walk in and walk out, and that is the reason why it has become a den for terrorism. Secondly, is that from Mauritania up to Central African Republic, the entire Sahel has activity and a uniqueness of terrorist organization who have turned the place to abode. You have the Islamic Maghreb, you have the Al-Shabaab, you have the Lakurawa, you have over 15 to 20 terrorist organizations that are operating in the Sahel. And they find heaven in Nigeria because the borders are porous. And that is why it is easier for them to put pressure on Nigeria from the north. And there is something that is called the migration of terror. The migration of terror from that particular region had also moved towards the north central, and it is because these guys understand the entire terrain in the forest. But like I said, the intelligence agencies have failed Nigerians to be able to help us use intelligence-led approach to contain and prevent and repel most of these people. And as we have the pressure from the north, we also have that same pressure from the Gulf of Guinea. And the Gulf of Guinea is the second dangerous region that has also put pressure on Nigeria from the southern part. So you realize that Nigeria is actually sandwiched between two axes of evil. One is the Sahel, the second one is the Gulf of Guinea. The migration of all of these individuals from these places had created a situation. But let us be very clear. Killings are happening, and that is a fact. There are lots of fatalities that Nigerians record on a daily basis, but the unfortunate situation is that these people who are killed are being affected simply because they are geographically located in a particular place where lack of infrastructure to protect them have also prevailed for a very long time.
But
If
why
the
is
same
that?
people,
Why is that really? Because,
it is the failure
you
of
know,
the state. It is the
yes.
failure of the state. That is actually what the case is. Because if the state had taken the responsibility to protect, to be very honest, nobody will be coming with the conversation about whether people die. The one single life in Nigeria matter. But again, Nigerians and the Nigerian state does not respect those lives. And that is the reason why we have this sort of situations prevailing.
Countries like Chad, on Monday, we saw the news that they have closed out their borders to Nigeria, right? They don't want any infiltration and all of that. I feel we're going to see more of that happening, all right? And like you rightly mentioned, it's going to take a toll on our economy because investors will pull out. There's going to be a standstill for a moment. But now, I'm wondering, because regardless of what's going on, our government seem very detached, right? They don't seem to see the urgency. Why is the response slow? In fact, if Donald Trump didn't say anything, I bet you that, because this conversation has been ongoing for the longest, I think since August or September, about the genocide happening in Nigeria. We've seen people in the UK, we've seen in different parts of the world talk about it, except for the government of the nation where it's happening. So why is the response like that, really? What's going on?
Amnesty International did a report once, and they call it blood on our hands, blood on their shoulder, and I forgot what it literally means is that there is a very big economy around insecurity. That economy is both pushed forward by the state and non-state actor. If you check the movement of arms from Libya, there is a corridor and a movement that came in from Libya up until somewhere in Maiduguri. And then, of course, that particular pathway has been a den for arms trafficking. So how our own security agencies over the years have not been able to manage to respond to it is a big problem. Two is that there are some lakes in those areas that people don't move arms on their own. They actually put them in between bamboo trees, and they put them on the water, and those bamboos now follow the currents of the water, and they actually birth in a particular location where there are people already there waiting to pick them up. No escorts. You just see them floating on the water, and you just don't pay attention to them. But they're actually transportation for arms that are moving across, and of course have specific destination. But again, intelligence agencies don't actually push or in any way contain this. Provided the state, we have surrendered right to protect ourselves to the state, and that is the reason why we are not creating an environment of chaos, and that people are not carrying weapons on their own, because we feel that all of these things under the Constitution has been surrendered to the state, and it is now the state that now has the responsibility to protect. And if you check what definition a state is meant to be, one, it has about geography, two is about population, three is about, and all of these things has its own definition. And that is why if you look at the definition of the genocide that people are also putting forward, you realize that it is something that also requires additional clarification. Because I talked about how very systematic some set of people are actually being targeted in a particular region. But again, if you go to Maiduguri, if you go to other parts of Yobe and Adamawa, if you go to Katsina, if you go to Kano, if you go to Kaduna, most of these places also have other people of other faiths who also are affected. And it is also unfortunate that we're having this kind of conversation because whether or not they are Christian or Muslim or Hindus, the fact is that they are human beings. And the first right that we have and guaranteed under the Constitution is the right to life. So if the right to life had been taken away, it means that somebody had failed in their responsibility to protect. And that is the reason why we need to further use the energy to start debating amongst ourselves as to who dies the most, to hold government to account, because it is actually an absence of accountability that has actually brought us to this space. And I think for me, that is the conversation that should shape citizens' opinion about how the state should be held to account.
All right. I mean, we're so pressed for time. But before I let you go, sir, what would you say to both Nigerians and international observers about the real picture of what's happening in Nigeria, in this nation, and what, a balanced path forward should look like for us?
To Nigerians is the fact that we have a problem, and collectively we are the solution. Help cannot come from abroad. Our salvation is in our hands. And it is now for us to take it forward and help fashion out a future that will help us leave a country to our children that we can be proud to say we have bequeathed to them a nation that is devoid of hate and division. And I think that is what we collectively must do as a people. To the international community, we need support in terms of intelligence. We need support in terms of supporting the government to hold them to account. We need support in terms of exposing political class that have been involved in this conspiracy theory. Because again, currently the US also has said that in the coming weeks they were going to name some. If you recall that in the last administration, Lai Mohammed kept saying that they had a list of people who were sponsoring terrorists and their Nigerian politicians, and that list will be to public. For 2 years, they kept using that list as a threat, and we never saw anything. Right. And that, again, is something that we need to help the international community to help us unpack. Those people who are actually the enablers, we need them to be exposed, and we need them to be sanctioned and be banned from traveling abroad, so that all of us can stay here and be confronted with what is going on, and so that they can be forced to act.
Thank you so much. I mean, unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but thank you for your brilliant insights to this conversation. And I think this is something that we're going to keep open, because now that we are hearing that they're beginning to testosterone and all of that, it gets really scary. And we all have to rise up to the occasion. Like you said, our salvation is not going to come from abroad or anything. We have our own solutions. But thank you for sharing this evening, and do enjoy the rest of your day, sir. Now, oh my goodness, this conversation really gets me in my feelings, right? You see, the word genocide is not one to be used lightly, to be very honest. It carries the weight of history, it carries the weight of humanity's deepest wounds. But beyond political statements and global debates, there are real Nigerians, men, women, children, caught in the cycles of this violence, crying out for justice and safety every day. A lot of people are very displaced. They don't even have family anymore. You hear news of somebody that said, I watched them kill my family. It's not a great place to be. So whether or not the term fits, what is undeniable is the fact that suffering is real. People are dying, just like the guest says, And while the world debates the semantics, really, the victims still wait for peace. They wait for justice. They wait for truth. And just like we saw in our quote for today, the minister said that we are welcoming cooperation and dialogue, and it has to come, of course, with understanding. But you see, perhaps that understanding has to begin with listening. You have to truly, truly listen to your people that are living through this pain. You don't have to sit in your high horse and give data that don't exist and give press statements of things you don't even believe in, just because you want to say, oh, we responded. I mean, if Donald Trump didn't come out, we would definitely, most likely, not even get a press statement, talk more of reactions. So please, let's do better. We can't afford to have a war in Nigeria. We can't afford to have all of these things. We're attracting the wrong kind of attention to ourselves. And this is not where we should be. People are dying. We're not taking that away. Christians are dying. Muslims are dying. But people are dying. That's the general summary of what it is. And it's not supposed to be. You should protect these people, not take life away from them. Anyway, before we go, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Official Upgrade TV. Drop a comment on this particular conversation. Like, share, follow us on all our social media platforms. Yes, we've seen the quotes by our Minister of Information. He said, we welcome cooperation and dialogue, but it must come with understanding. My name is Chioma Kalu, and this has been Waste Prime Time. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.